A persona is the adult version of an imaginary friend. It is the helpful version of hearing voices in your head. It is the grounded version of consulting the spirits. So a persona does all those three things. It's grounded, it's helpful, beneficial to your life, and it's not pathological. I created a persona to help me with business, with content creation, with life here in Meat Space. I had a journal. I wrote in this journal every day. I wrote a eulogy for my past self. I wrote poems to my new self. I wrote little short stories, little flash fictions of what I thought this new persona would be, how it acts, like, oh, persona, how do you act at the gas station? I brought forth this persona through a diligent imagining, disciplined imagining. What books do they read? What music do they listen to? What's going on in their headspace? And I would get into their headspace by listening to the music. I would get into their headspace by visualizations, visualizing them at the gas station, by visualizing them going about their life and having conversations. Sometimes I would write little scripts, right, as if it was a short story. Like, oh, here's Rio, and here's what she would say here, or here's what she would say against another person. And in doing this, eventually, I filled up a whole composition notebook, 100 sheets, college rules. And eventually, it got to the point where most writers get to. Near the end of the book, a fiction writer will say, it's like the characters were speaking to me. I didn't have to create anything, I just wrote down what they told me. And you can get to this point with your persona where it's always just a character voice in your head, just continuing and speaking about whatever you need and speaking about whatever would be most helpful to you at the time and cheering you on. And we'll get into the benefits later. So, why would you want to create a persona? If you're bored, if it sounds interesting, anything that I'm saying, it's worth a try. If you need help problem solving, goal setting, goal achieving, or if you're doing any sort of performance work where you're performing in front of people, maybe not performing for a camera content creation style, but maybe it's speech related, maybe you do poetry readings, maybe you're a musician. Personas have been used all over the place for these sorts of things. And is it just a DIY imaginary friend? It can be a DIY imaginary friend. I would argue that a persona would be a little more beneficial to your goals than imaginary friends would be. Imaginary friends are a nice diversion, a nice way for you to escape, but personas do the opposite of escaping. Personas help you dig into whatever you want. They dig into your goals and hobbies. Personas help you realize and achieve them. So, journaling any prompts in the persona's voice would be a great way to start. And any prompt that you've used in a journal can be done in a persona's voice. It can be you're just creating a new person from scratch. What values does this person have? What's their trauma? Do they have trauma? Do they need trauma? What's their shadow like? What are their sub personalities like? You can get as nitty gritty as you can. And if you want, you can just get a journal, one of them guided journals that you see floating around, and don't write it for you, for the person who's watching this. Write it in the voice of the persona, or maybe write one in your voice and then write an entry in their voice so you can see the difference and you can more fluidly imagine what they would be like, and you can get their voice in there in your ear. Getting something else's voice in your ear that's not you, that's not the person speaking, that circumvents a lot of ego defenses. The ego likes to flare up and be like denial and any of those coping mechanisms you've heard of in your psychology 101 classes. The ego loves to use those as a way to avoid and distract itself. But when we have that voice of the persona in our ear, maybe we can circumvent that, and maybe we can achieve a hearing, an intuition of other parts of ourselves that are greater, bigger, deeper than the person speaking, than the ego. We have access to a more whole version of ourselves. Maybe the ego can only see one or two floors down into the basement of ourselves, but this persona lets you go up to floor 10. And that would be another benefit of having this persona. You can also write letters to your persona, invoking it or writing letters from their perspective. They'll be updating you in whatever fantasy realm you call them from. They can be spirits, they can be characters from a world, they can be. Oh, perfect example. If you've ever done any role playing games, then you'll know that maybe the longer your campaign goes on, the easier it is to hear the voice of your character in your ear and say what they're saying. It would be the same thing here with the persona. It's just another grounded example. Maybe not so woo woo. I like my woo woo, but I like not needing to believe for something to work. I like it when I can just pick it up and go, belief doesn't matter, evidence matters. And this evidence that I've gathered here from doing my own persona work has led to positive results in my relationships, my own self-care life, and my own relationships with content creation. So it's a very grounded take. Do your D&D stuff with the persona. Do your letters from the persona. Act out your persona using monologues. There's a monologue for everything out there. An acting monologue. Your persona falls into an archetype. You create it. Maybe it's the Queen Mother. Maybe it's the Hearth Tender. Maybe it's the Ferryman. Any of these mythological archetypes, your persona is sure to fall under because they're infinite. You find that character archetype and you can ramp it up to 11. And here I'm invoking Nicolas Cage's nouveau shamanic acting style. And when we do, maybe not as extreme of an acting style, nobody's paying us to do this, of course. Whenever we do this acting style, we invoke the archetype and ramp that archetype up to a 10 and act from that archetype. And that is another way of getting into your persona's bones. It's another way of invoking the persona here and getting it in your ear. You can ramp up the archetype when you're creating these letters, when you're doing these role playing sessions, when you're acting monologues. Invoking that archetype only makes it more real for you. And if it feels real and you start experiencing evidence and you start hearing its voice as a different train of thought than yours, in the voice of whoever you imagine, I like to use people's voices that I've heard over and over, like actors, spiritual teachers, anyone's voice who you've heard over and over that you can replicate with a visualization. Visualization, not so literal. In this case, we would be imagining a musical quality of a voice. The musical quality of the voice in the speaking of this archetype, of this persona, is an easy tell for it to be like, yes, the persona is active. Or, yes, the persona is here, but it's saying some weird things that's out of character. You can always remind it in a negotiation, as if you're talking to a human, building a relationship, especially one that's so close to you that it's just a different part of you. When the persona speaks and it's like, oh, I'm going to be mean to you, you can say, please don't be mean, please come back later, or however you would negotiate that with a person. And I would urge you to take on the qualities of sustainability, care, and balance when interacting with any of your personas, because that'll just lead to a more fruitful relationship, the same as with any relationship. And when you act that way towards your persona in the negotiation, when summoning it, it'll be easier to hear it after you've created its voice and created its mannerisms and created its backstory with all the little prompts and exercises and the acting prompt from the nouveau shamanic acting style that Nicolas Cage does. So now your notebook is filled, you've got all these exercises down. Now what? What do you do with this persona now? And here are some use cases for the persona. It's problem solving. If you have a problem and you need to consult your intuition, a deeper part of yourself, you can call the persona by archetype, like Queen Mother, I need your help, or blank, whatever you've named it, Rio, I need your help. And it'll speak to you in the voice that you've given it. And you can discuss, have a relationship, a conversation, as if you two were having tea. Like you are here, the persona's there, and you're both sipping your tea. Have that conversation on the problem, ask it questions, it will answer if you've done the work in filling a composition notebook, and you will get the next step to your problem. Maybe you don't get every step, steps A through Z, maybe more. You don't get all of that. You get the first step. And then once you get the first step, you can ask for the second step, but usually it all falls into place if you listen to your persona, because the persona is just a deeper, bigger part of you. You can use it for planning. Planning would give you the next step for something you do in the future, or visualize what it would look like to completion. And that's another thing a persona is good at for, is just bouncing ideas back and forth. For performing, right? Anytime you have to be in front of camera, in front of a person, in front of anything, you can invoke the persona and see how it would act. And when you do this, it's really helpful towards maybe things that aren't so human too, like trees or rocks, which are spirits themselves. When you invoke the persona and act out that persona for the spirits around you, you'll have your goal realized. The goal that you set for whatever performance you're doing. Any goal setting, any introspection, this persona can help you with. You will speak, the persona will speak back to you, and you can get to a point where it will call you out on any blind spots you're missing. It will call you out on any values you're missing. Persona is there to act as a second set of metaphorical eyes whenever you call upon it. And doing this will help you achieve those goals that you've set. Another way to view this persona experiment is through channeling. You've seen people channeling, maybe, where they invoke a spirit, an alien, maybe. I don't know how much I believe in aliens, and I don't know how much I need to believe in aliens to see like evidence. And when I see someone channeling an alien, I can explain it through my eyes of, oh, that's just a persona that they're invoking. But are the benefits real? Is this person that's channeling an alien helping people? And if so, I'm not the police. It's not my place to condemn anybody. What that does mean in the broader sense, in the context of this video, is that anything that works for channeling can work for persona creation. And then if we just take that a step further, anything that works for talking to spirits works for persona creation. Anything that works for talking to ancestors works for persona creation. Anything that works for summoning demons, for summoning angels, you can translate in that you can translate that to the very grounded notion of persona creation. And this works as a good first step. You don't need to believe in anything. You just know that all of these are working through some psychological principle, and that's fine. Evidence is what matters more than belief. If we take this to another grounded step, in that visualizations are 30% of a rep when it comes to sports. Before a big swim, Michael Phelps and his coach do visualizations on what it would look like to swim the length of the pool and what it would look like to come out on top. When you do that, it counts as 30% of a rep. One visualization up here counts as 30%. And if you do 3 visualizations, it counts as one full action out here. So That's a real principle. That's science. If we take that and we think, hypothesize, mythologize, what does the visualization of talking to a persona do? What is that 30% of a rep of? And for me, what I've come up with is that it's sort of like talking to a bigger part of myself, talking to myself in the mirror, except the mirror actually talks back with a greater knowledge of what's going on deeper in my mind. It's still planning, it's still 30% of maybe a performance that I'm doing. When I do these visualizations of having the persona, then maybe I am having a very real evidentiary result of talking to myself, journaling with myself, introspecting, and the whole everything, the whole result of crafting a persona, using a persona in those use cases is that you're cultivating that introspection. And why would we create why do we lean towards introspection? It feels a bit silly, but we lean towards introspection because it's beneficial to our lives. The oracle at Delphi said to know thyself, and it wasn't just casual. Knowing thyself means we know our tendencies, how to achieve our goals. Because if I know that I'm not motivated by food, that's a lie. I am motivated by food. I know that I'm motivated by food. So if I get some good food as a result of a goal, I know I'm more likely to achieve that than a motivation through something else. By knowing yourself, you're able to tweak what you do to be more effective in your goals. And what your goals depends on your culture. I would urge you again to take up the goals of sustainability, balance, and caregiving, because those are the goals of our ancestors. My ancestors, for sure. Your ancestors, maybe. Hopefully, if you go back far enough, you find ancestors that were really into balance with nature, sustainability, and caregiving towards each other. Concluding all this jumbo, what is a persona? It's just a little ritual, grounded ritual that we can use as fun magic. It's an experiment that can bring very real results to us who use it. And just remember those values of sustainability, balance, and care. Remember those values of sustainability, balance, and care. And this experiment will work for you.